And we are back one final time on Capitol Tonight. It is really at this point hardly news that many of New York's bridges are old and worn down, some teetering on the edge of questionable safety, which is worrisome. That, however, does not stop millions of people from crossing these bridges every day in their cars. A new report from the group Transportation for America looks at exactly how many vehicles are traveling across deficient bridges in the nation's top metro areas. For example, in Rochester, more than 1 million cars and trucks travel over 142 structurally deficient bridges every day. And in Syracuse, 7 vehicles cross a deficient bridge every second. Every second, yes. My next guest is very familiar with the state's infrastructure problems. Mike Elmnendorf is the president and CEO of the Association of General Contractors. Mike, it is good to see you.
Thank you, Liz. Good to be back.
A hiatus.
Well, it hasn't been that long.
A little bit long. First of all, let's remind viewers, so we don't scare the living daylights out of everyone, what does structurally deficient mean? Right.
Well, you hear 2 terms typically. Structurally deficient, which means it's a bridge that has some maintenance issues. It needs repair. It needs a higher level of maintenance. It needs a higher level of inspection. It doesn't mean the bridge is going to fall down. And then you have functionally obsolete bridges, which means it's a bridge that may not necessarily have anything wrong with it, but it's not built to the latest, most current design standards that you build a bridge now to. So those are sort of the 2 categories, and we have about 28% of our bridges and overpasses in New York that fall into one of those 2 categories, which is not a good place to be.
You didn't find this particular report surprising?
No, it's not surprising at all. I don't know this particular group, but they're saying what we've been saying and others in New York have been saying for a long time, including having said it more than a few times on this particular program.
Indeed, we have.
Our infrastructure in New York is in very bad shape, and it's in bad shape because for decades we've not had sufficient resources to maintain it and keep it up. And just like anything else, if you're a homeowner, if you don't keep up your house, if you don't maintain the roof, eventually your roof is going to fail and it's going to need to be replaced. And as you know, that's more expensive than doing maintenance all along. So it's really a question of deferring maintenance and spending more later, which is the position that we now find ourselves in.
Let's talk briefly about sort of like the poster child for all of this, which is the Tappan Zee.
Sure.
I did speak with Rob Astorino, the Westchester County executive, who sort of his cause célèbre these days. The Obama administration came in and said, yes, Governor Cuomo, we will fast-track this project for you. But there's a lot of questions, and the first is they'll only go up to $5 billion.
Right.
And most people are saying, well, wait a minute, this is a $12 billion project at least, right?
Well, it's a very substantial piece of infrastructure. It's in a very difficult position to build. There's a lot of issues with where you're going to build it because there's not a lot of land in the area. There's a lot of different ways you can build it. There's been, I mean, this has been talked about for a very long time. And there's all these questions about, are you going to have rail on the bridge? What kind of design are you going to use? Are you going to do the full soup to nuts design, or are you just going to build a bridge? The bottom line is that bridge needs to be replaced. Like a lot of other pieces of infrastructure in the state, it's in very bad shape. You guys have done a great job reporting on that. County Executive Astorino, who's a friend, has done a great job highlighting it. Frankly, I think it's clear the governor is very focused on it, and it's in his backyard, so you can understand why he would be, but it's a big deal to New York. Imagine the impact on New York if one day we woke up and discovered that you couldn't travel across the Tappan Zee Bridge anymore. It would be devastating. And so I think the administration is very focused on it. We're going to be heading downstate next week to participate in a meeting that the Federal Highway Administration is holding to talk about what's in the works there. And so we'll certainly be a part of the discussions going forward trying to address that.
And from your purposes, obviously it's a good thing because it means jobs for your members, right? So
it means jobs for our members. It would mean a lot of jobs. But the thing to remember is it's not just you create a lot of jobs by building infrastructure. The direct economic impact is fairly substantial. But more importantly than that, our economy depends on this infrastructure. Look at what happens in a community when you have a road that gets closed or becomes unusable, a bridge that gets closed or becomes unusable. You can't go to the store. You can't get to work. Your kids can't get to school.
The people of Crown Point know all too well how this works.
And that's what's happening around the state. We saw it this summer right here in our own backyard with the South Mall ramp. And frankly, we saw a lot of damage around the state with the wake of the hurricanes that had a huge impact on New York. Some of that was unavoidable, but clearly some of that infrastructure was not in very good shape to begin with.
Right.
And if you look at some of the newer bridges that were hit, they fared a lot better on average than some of the older infrastructure that was already not doing so well.
Yeah, the one thing that I found surprising about this, though, is that we ranked 23rd nationally 23rd nationally. That's better than I thought we would do. I mean, and actually a little bit scary, 1 being the worst, 51 being the best. So we're right in the middle, and 1 out of every 8 bridges that motorists are crossing in New York each day are likely to be deteriorating to some degree. 12% statewide are rated structurally deficient, as we mentioned. That's actually compared to 11.5% nationwide. I mean, I thought we were like really in the doghouse on this one, but as it turns out, the rest of the nation is doing
well. You know, there's different ways that you can crunch those numbers. Better Roads magazine, which I'm sure is on your regular reading list.
It's right up there with yeah.
You know, just last year reported that New York had the 5th highest percentage of structurally deficient or functionally obsolete bridges in the country. And beyond that, talking about roads, about half of our major roads are really in poor condition. A lot of our infrastructure was built with a 50-year lifespan in mind. A lot of it's about 60 years old at this point, so the math isn't that hard to figure out there. And really, New York needs to be rebuilt. And when we talk about infrastructure, by the way, there's a lot of focus on roads and bridges, but there's been some other reporting on this recently.
Sure.
Our environmental infrastructure is in very bad shape. It needs, over the next 20 years, about $75 billion with a B. I'm tempted to do my Dr. Evil voice there talking about that, because if you add that in with the $175 billion that we need for the transportation infrastructure, that's $250 billion over the next 20 years.
So is anyone talking about a bond act? Because that's where this is going to come from. It's going to be a bond act, right? I mean, pretty much?
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, there have been a lot of things talked about. I think there are a lot of different things that the state needs to do to meet these needs. Some of them we've talked about, starting with fixing the way we pay for it now, which is the Dedicated Highway and Bridge Trust Fund, which is not so dedicated. And a lot of that money is being spent on things other than road and bridge maintenance. There's also a lot of revenue that's not getting there, either revenue that's being diverted before it gets there, or if you look at Native American sales, it's a pretty substantial amount of gas tax revenue that ought to be collected that's not being collected.
Well, yeah, I mean, in that money, the thing is, though, and unfortunately we're out of time, but that money's been spent like 9 ways to Sunday already, right?
Well, we need to stop that, and we need to look at more broadly bringing a lot more resources to the table, because the state can't decide not to do these things. It's got to get done. It's going to get done. The question is, how are we going to pay for it, and how late are we going to do it, and how much more expensive will it be? Right.
Well, more expensive at the back end when things actually fall apart and must be fixed, as opposed to at the front end when you can actually control the costs a little bit. Mike Elmnendorf, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.